Howdy, everybody. Humanities 2 Shasta College. How y'all doing? It is Thursday. We're doing art, painters this for the next, probably through next week. We'll see how that goes. There's lots out there that needs to be explored, and I want to open these new worlds up to you all. I've posted a couple short documentaries on Canvas. One is on what goes into preserving and exploring a painting that's over 70 years old. Jackson Pollock's one of his famous works, a mural. It's only 10 minutes long. Please take a look at it and look at how people seriously take this painting or any paintings that they're trying to preserve and trying to understand. The artist is long dead, killed himself in the 1950s in a car wreck. They think it was sort of a suicide. We'll never know, of course, for sure, but he was drunk and he got in a car and he rammed into a tree, possibly on purpose. Tortured artist, kind of the cliche alcoholic tortured artist. Well, this is one of his paintings that was asked by famous wealthy woman in New York, Peggy Guggenheim. Maybe you've heard of the Guggenheim Museum. That's her, folks. And to paint this mural on her wall in her apartment. So it was a commission, but he didn't do that. He didn't paint the wall itself. He painted a large canvas and they stuck it up on the wall. Now, when she moved later on, this is in the documentary, when she moved to Europe, I think that's where she ended up most of her years, Venice. They moved the painting out of her apartment, and it was in the University of Iowa, I think, in their art center, until it was given to the Getty Museum, I believe. Anyway, it's in the little documentary. You watch how huge it is and how carefully they treat it, and then scientists get a hold of it and they try to examine what makes this art what it is. We'll never know. We can't interview the artists, but scientific research goes deep. And that's how seriously people in the world take painters. So check that out. You'll see the telling is in the detail. I posted another short documentary on Frida Kahlo. I'm gonna talk about female painters today. Frida Kahlo, maybe you've heard of her, maybe you've seen some of her artwork, possibly, hopefully. She was an icon, a divine icon, some say, and that's got religious overtones. Yes, it does, folks. Born and raised in Mexico, and somehow through talent and personality and character and inspiration, divine or not, she pulled herself out of a small town in Mexico and became a world famous painter of very disturbing paintings. She also was involved. I married a very famous painter, Diego Rivera. They were quite the couple. He is one of the most famous mural painters in the history of painters, actually, not just Mexican painters, worldwide renowned. If you guys ever get to San Francisco, go up to, if you know where Coit Tower is, do you? It's not one of the high points in San Francisco. Walk in there. There's some of his mural work in there. Diego Rivera. Anyway, it's a sight to behold. If you ever get to see some of this stuff close up, you'll see the power of it. Frida had a horrible accident. riding on a bus, and huge car wreck crash, and a she was speared, literally speared and impaled with a big metal object. And I hate to say where it went, folks. Yes, folks, it went into her vagina all the way through the back of her back and came out the other side. And she lived. And she was in excruciating pain for the rest of her life, which dictated what she painted, how she behaved, and kept her on the world stage through this incredible, horrible accident. Fascinating, fascinating woman. If you guys like punk rock, and I know you do, they love her because she was an early punk before the music. It's all about attitude, folks, and she had it, and she had it. And she's an icon now, a feminist icon, because she established her own persona. And maybe you've seen pictures of her. She's got, she always wore traditional Mexican peasant dresses. She never tried to dress Western to please people in the West. She lived in New York City. They lived in France for a while, so she was a cosmopolitan woman. She stopped plucking the hair on her face, and yes, she grew the famous unibrow. Maybe you've seen pictures of her. Maybe it's turned you off, or maybe it's not. She also famously had pretty nice mustache going for a while. She didn't care. She was herself, along with this horrible accident that kept her over the years in different infections and different um, pain meds. That's going to mess you up, folks, if you get impaled anywhere in your body. That area, especially, is unfortunate, but that's who she was. And it made her who she became. So check her out. Um, those are the two short documentaries. I'm going to keep posting more. You guys dip in and out of them. I won't sign a paper yet because I know your other papers are due tomorrow. So don't like to sign them on top of each other. So we'll probably do the next essay next week, and it's probably going to be on one of these painters we're talking about. So female painters, they had always were always considered secondary citizens in the paint world. It was a male-dominated world, like so much of the art world is dominated by males. Literature, filmmaking, music. Do you know any? Did we cover any classical female composers? No, we did not. Is there anybody as revered as Beethoven and Mozart? No, there is not. Were women composers? Yes, but on a small scale. Were there female directors in Hollywood before this new era we're in right now? Yes, there was. One of the most famous directors, and when we do Hollywood or filmmaking, I should say, in the next maybe after this time, the painters. She was directing a silent films. She directed a lot of films, and but most of her stuff was destroyed because you know what they used to do with silent films, folks, when they didn't have any room for storage. This is later on in years, long before the silent era had ended. They destroyed them to make room for the new stuff. But some of her stuff still exists. Her work still exists. Has a very, I would call it, feminist point of view, which is pretty radical for 1918, 1919. And at one time, she was making more money than any director in Hollywood. Nobody's ever, very few people have heard of her, but unless you study cinema, We'll be talking about her later. But anyway, so females are no different in the painting world. There was some famous wives of painters, like Jacqueline Pollock's wife, who became her own uh, iconic painter on her own, abstract expressionist, but she never got the due that her husband did because she wasn't the alcoholic who died in a suicide. y- You know, the romantic gesture. She actually lived her life out longer. Um, Same thing with Film de Kooning's wife. They had pretty good careers, but they were always considered Film de Kooning's wife, Jackson's Pollock's wife. Now, that helped their careers getting noticed, but did they actually need their famous husbands to ride on their coattails? And that's just how it was. So we still talk about these artists, but we mostly talk about the men. Now, there was a very, very powerful artist, Georgia O'Keeffe, maybe you've heard of her, who I believe elevated herself above the male dominated world, and she's made her own um, place in the art world. She's mostly famous for her paintings of, of New Mexico, Taos, New Mexico. You maybe seen her stuff. That's everywhere. It's on calendars and cards. But she moved to out to New Mexico way before anybody else moved out there, and because she fell in love with the light. If you've ever been to Santa Fe, New Mexico, the light is everything. That's the sunlight, folks. Um, it inspired her and inspired a generation of artists, not just her, but she sort of led the way. This woman artist was strong on her own might way. Anyway, maybe you've heard of her. Hopefully, you have. Maybe you'll seek some of her work out. If you ever go to Santa Fe, New Mexico, they have the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. A friend of mine made a documentary that plays there. Then there's photographer Cindy Sherman, who's essentially my age, which I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I've been around. Um, she's a photographer. Check her out. Does she photo herself in? She would make up fictionalized scenarios and posing using herself as her own model. She would play cinema scenes from cinema, film noir that never really took place, folks. She's making this stuff up. Um, she had a whole series of where she played retirees in Florida, old ladies, and it's really quite brilliant and scary. The makeup is terrifying, and she made a unique place for herself in photo realism photographs. That's what we're all doing now, right? Taking photos with these things. These things have made it way too easy. Now we could take a picture and put the Sidney Sherman effect on it, and it'll look like a Sidney Sherman photo. She made a series of photos, and you know Madonna, the singer, of course you do. She bought this series of photos, paid over $1 million for it, and that was a huge, huge wake up call that photographs are equally as important as paintings, and that photographs could be fine art also. There's been other great photographers, Annie Leibovitz, and so many more others. Ansel Adams taking all the photographs of, why can't I think of it? The Yosemite before anybody discovered it. Um, Photographs have a place. They don't ever sell as much as a painting does. But if you ever seen a great photo display, and I'm not talking about photos of the Sundial Bridge. Sorry, folks. Um, they've earned their right in the pantheon of great art. And Sidney Sherman is definitely in that element. Now, does it take a big sale? Does it take money to make somebody famous? That's a good paper to write. In my opinion, it's probably does, which is too bad because mostly people say, well, did he make money? Van Gogh didn't make any money, folks. Not while he was alive. We like our artists to be wealthy, I think, and it makes them seem more famous. Like Picasso made a lot of money in his time. Other people didn't. Perhaps they weren't as good at marketing. That's a huge deal. But some of these artists, like OKeefe, Frida Kahlo, Cindy Sherman, they made some money, substantial amount of money. It means they're beloved. That means they have marketing. They have people getting their stuff out there. It takes a lot. You just don't sell a painting, one painting to somebody. That's unless you're selling it to somebody famous who talks about it. That helps. So somebody like Madonna comes along and it puts a stamp of approval on Cindy Sherman's photographs as high art, serious to be taken seriously. There was another painter, Alice Neal, who is a real fascinating woman, early feminist before the word was even out there. She was this free spirit, painting portraitures, which was not always at the forefront of great art, um, especially when abstract expressionism came in and kind of knocked it off the front pages. But she kept at it. Little by little, she drew and painted an incredible body of interesting portraits that are so well done and so expressive that to me they're just as meaningful and deep as abstract art because her characters are all, a lot of them are in the nude and they aren't fancy models, folks. It's a lot of realistic nude, overweight people, men and women, not just beautiful models. And sometimes it's not a thrill to look at it, but what's thrilling about it is the human condition that she was able to capture. And that took someone who's brave. The models were brave to sit there. Later on, she did very well, meaning she made a living off of it. Then she fell out of favor during the time of Andy Warhol and the pop culture, pop art phase because she wasn't considered that. So her stuff would mostly sit in her apartment. And she had different husbands and different families, but painting was most important. There's a great documentary on her right now on YouTube. She died, I want to say 1981 or so. She was born at the turn of the century, 1900. And she was painting up until the last. moment of her life. Never stopped. And you can see the interviews with her as an older woman, obviously, and just her exploring and talking about the deep abiding passion to paint. There's another artist I want to talk about briefly before I shut up. She's a Japanese artist. She's alive. So Cindy Sherman, by the way. So there's two of these women that are still alive. Uh, Yayayo Kusama. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably messing it up. She has an incredible journey. I just watched a documentary on her. She's an icon of the art world. Probably right now the most famous painter in the world. Known for her polka dots, if that's a word to use. I'm not sure if it is, but she paints a lot of polka dots, folks. And her iconic fashion sense and the fact that she has been on this world stage very, very many years, pushing the envelope. And a woman, a Japanese woman, pushing on the international stage is not an easy thing to do. And she is world renowned, considered brilliant. I don't like to toss the word genius around because a lot of times I believe it takes more than just inspiration. It also takes luck, the right person seeing your art who then pushes it out into the public. Without that, you're just in your house painting away. I made some films in my time. I hope to make some more. There was a cool book by Paul Oster about a filmmaker who made like 20 movies, paid for it himself. This is a novel, folks. This is a fictitious novel. And in the novel, he dies. And in his will, he says, all my films should be destroyed. He never shows these films to the public. And yet they're 2-hour Hollywood style films that were all professionally put together, professionally shot, cast, acted in. So he brings a guy out when he's dying to kind of get these films together and prepare them to be destroyed. And this guy started watching these films, and he takes it upon himself to try to get the filmmaker to just have this stuff screened out into the world. Now it'd be all on Netflix or something. This book came out before Netflix, and the artist is adamant about nobody seeing this films. He goes, I didn't do it for an audience. I did it for the creative process, and that should be enough. Should it be enough? Absolutely. Painters just don't paint to sell their one painting. Novelists keep writing whether they sell anything or not. Filmmakers keep shooting films whether they get into Sundance or not. Composers keep composing. It doesn't stop you when you don't have a choice. These women artists didn't have a choice. They had it tougher because it's a male dominated world, and you come up against that all the time. It's not easy. Anyway, I'm going to post some more videos for you guys to watch. I hope you enjoy them. Um, hope you're watching them because we're off the textbook, at least temporarily. And we're going out into this venturing out into this territory here, and because that's where some of the truth is, and we're after the truth, folks. I'll see you next time.